إن الحمد لله نحمده تعالى ونستعينه ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده. وارض اللهم عن صحابته والتابعين وتابعيهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the last khutbah, I spoke about an important issue that has to do with the crisis of identity that faces Muslims in non-Muslim land, in majority non-Muslim land. And I quoted Sharik Siddiqui, Dr. Sharik, who said that up until the last wave of immigration of Muslims, of immigrant Muslims, all that preceded that dissolved. Islam did not survive before the last wave from the 60s, 1966 onward. And I explained that this is an issue of identity preservation. And I chose the topic around this time because these are the holidays. And during the holidays, that's when that dissonance, nashaz, that dissonance caused by identity conflict. You live in a society that celebrates holidays, مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ, that really are not even holidays. Last night it was Halloween. I went to the mall, I couldn't walk. Literally, I could not walk in the mall with my wife because of kids running around, standing in line to collect little candy that they probably have tons of it in their home in the first place. The whole thing just doesn't make any sense. And then the worst part is when your kids come in and they want to do that and try to explain to them how this is not compatible with the deen. So anyway, the topic of the khutbah last time was that there are three layers or three levels, three dimensions that we have to pay attention to when it comes to the identity issue. The most important one, the foundational one, has to do with our belief system. That it is important for us to teach our children about the most important issue, which is Tawheed. Where did we come from? Who created us? What happens after we die? All of these burning questions that humanity has been trying to answer for thousands of years must be answered at some point or another. How are we blessed? All of that. I also mentioned that the second dimension, which is a little less important, but it reinforces the first one, and that is behavior. And how we need to guide the behavior of our children, especially when they are young, so that it's compatible with our beliefs. And last but not least is the appearance issue, which again, I see that in many Muslim societies, this trio is lopsided. We see that we focus more on the Islamic appearance than on the beliefs that Islam wants us to have. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Everything is upside down. But anyway, that was the last issue. Today I will continue on this topic, and I'd like to start by mentioning the topic. The title of today is how Islam dealt with those with special needs. But I cannot talk about that subject without talking about how Islam deals with those who do not have special needs, just regular children. And here, the first thing that comes to mind is a hadith narrated by Abdullah and Jabir ibn Abdullah. The hadith is in At-Tirmidhi, and it's a thing that happened, the incident that happened with Umar ibn Abi Salama. Now we need to know who's Abu Salama. Abu Salama is the husband of the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, who died and left Salama. Salama, the Prophet ﷺ, after her husband died, and she had a child. That child is Umar. Umar ibn Abi Salama. That's his name. And he was Rabibu Rasulillah. Rabibu Rasulillah means that the Prophet raised him. Rabbah means he raised him. In other words, what we call nowadays stepson. So he was raised as a little lad, a little child in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. And he says, I was eating with the Prophet ﷺ and my tashat yaday. In the Arabic language, the word tasha means wondered. So tashat yaday means he was eating from right once, from left once, from in front of him. He was just going all over the place. And at that time, people used to eat from one single plate, one single saucer. The idea of having individualized plates was also developed by Muslims later on. When the Crusaders came to the Middle East, they learned how to eat in personalized plates with forks and knives and everything. They learned that from Muslims. And that's very well documented. So this Sahabi says, Umar ibn Abi Salama, my hands wandered all over the place. And the Prophet ﷺ directed him. Watch how one short line in which the Prophet ﷺ told him what to do without burdening him with a long lecture and admonition. He said to him, Ya ghulam, O child, Sammi Allah, wa kul biyaminik, wa kul mimma yalik. That's it. Sammi Allah. Say Bismillah. It's that simple. Some people raise the issue, we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The interpreter said, he said, Sammillah means Bismillah. That's sufficient. If you want to say the whole thing, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and read al-Fatiha, that's up to you. But what's required, the sunnah is to simply say Bismillah. So the Prophet ﷺ said to the little child, Sammillah, say Bismillah. Wa kul biyaminik, eat with your right hand. Wa kul mimma yalik, eat from whatever is in front of you. In other words, all over the place. Because they used to eat with their fingers. SubhanAllah, nowadays with germs and germ transfer and everything, we know that that's one way that germs can transfer. But when you eat from in front of you. Wallahi, ya ikhwa, I remember eating with the Shaykh, rahimahullah. He was one of our mentors. Abdul Muta'al al-Jabri, rahimahullah. He was one of the scholars, the Egyptian scholars that we had of learning from here. He helped us open the masjid in North Bergen. He was the first imam there. Later on, he passed away. When we used to have dinner with him, we used to get invited. And he would sit down and there would be 10 different kinds of food on the table. If what happens to be in front of him was rice, he ate nothing but rice. If you didn't pay attention to him, you would notice Sheikh Abdul Muta'al was eating nothing but rice because he hadith so closely that he would not reach out to meat or anything or bread or anything else. One has to actually make sure to put the food in front of him and insist, Ya Sheikh, eat something, so that he would eat. But left to himself, to his devices, he would just follow the hadith and he would only eat from whatever exactly is in front of him. So in this hadith, we see how the Prophet ﷺ tells a very young child, Allah knows how old he was, or 5 years old. Sammillah, kul biyaminik, wa kul mimma yalik. These are the instructions the Prophet ﷺ gave to this little child. This is before the child was taught about Tawheed, before the child was taught about all the major issues of Islam. And that proves the point that I was mentioning in the last khutbah, in that behavior reinforces beliefs, beliefs reinforce behavior. They go together. We cannot do one without the other. I see that many times we insist on appearance more than behavior. Then we insist on behavior more than beliefs. At some point, the child rises and becomes an adult. He may memorize and remember all the behavioral issues that he or she was taught from his parents, but they may connect that to mardat Allah Azza wa Jal, to the pleasure of Allah. They may not understand that there is a reward for that. So that is one level of learning that we need to practice. The second level, which is a little bit more serious, and it takes place at a slightly older age. And that we learn from the hadith Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, who was also a very, very young lad raised in the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is his nephew, the son of Al-Abbas Abu al-Fadl radiallahu anhuma. Ibn Abbas was born 3 years before Hijrah. So he missed the first 10 years of da'wah. He was born 3 years before Hijrah. So when they went to Al-Madinah, he was 3 years old. So he was raised mostly in Al-Madinah. Once he was behind Rasulullah ﷺ, and the Prophet turned to him and he said to him the following amazing hadith. To him, he says, كنت خلف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I was behind the Prophet. And he said, Ya ghulam, O child. Notice the word Ya ghulam. Ya ghulam, O child. He says to him, إني أعلمك كلمات. Many of you have heard this hadith. It's in Riyadh al-Salihin. And if you read Riyadh al-Salihin, you'll find it in it. I'm going to teach you a few words. I'll explain them in more detail. I'm just going to say it quickly now, and then I'll go to the detail. I'm teaching you a few words. احفظ الله يحفظك. Now we're going to have to go over what does it mean, احفظ الله. But احفظ الله simply means be aware of Allah's obligations upon you. يحفظك, Allah Azza wa Jal will protect you. احفظ الله تجده تجاهك. You will find Allah Azza wa Jal ahead of you whenever you need Him. إذا سألت, if you ask Allah. وإذا استعنت, if you seek help from Allah. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةِ, know that if the entire ummah, the entire world, لَمْ اجْتَمَعَتْ, if they gather together so that they benefit you in any one بشيء, لَمْ يَنْفَعُكْ, they will not benefit you unless Allah Azza wa Jal had prescribed it to you. وَإِنْ اجْتَمَعُوا, and if they gather together, not one or two, all of them, everybody out there, على أن يضروك بشيء, to harm you in one way or another, لم يضروك, they will not harm you. إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله عليك, except for one thing that Allah Azza wa Jal has written for you. Or أقلام وجفت الصحف. This is an expression he used to conclude the hadith. The details. This was mentioned by Tirmidhi, hadith sahih. What is احفظ الله? احفظ الله, the literal meaning means keep Allah. How do you keep Allah? You can't translate this literally. Shaykh Sha'rawi rahimahullah, I looked up his translation, and his translation of احفظ الله, do not transgress over his boundaries. يعني ابتعد عن محارم الله. Stay away from what Allah Azza wa Jal has prohibited. That's what حفظ means. It means watch what Allah Azza wa Jal has prohibited and do not transgress. احفظ الله. And Shaykh Sha'rawi says, to tell this kid at that age, he was barely puberty, Ibn Abbas, when he told him this hadith. Basically what he's saying to him, Allah Azza wa Jal has given you, bestowed all of His ni'am, all of His blessings upon you before you reached this age of responsibility. Sin al-taklif, the age under which you become responsible for your actions. A person may live 15 years without being accountable to Allah Azza wa Jal for missing out on some things. Once a person reaches the age of puberty, he is responsible now. So what Shaykh Sha'rawi is saying, that Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed Ibn Abbas and blessed all of our children up to that age without asking them for anything. Now it is time for them to observe the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal and what is haram. That's the tafsir of Shaykh Sha'rawi of these two words, احفظ الله. يحفظك. يحفظك. Here he says it's mostly about معية الله, the company of Allah Azza wa Jal. And the scholars said that معية and pay attention to this, could be specific and it could be general. Specific, as Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, when he and Harun went to meet Fir'aun. إني معكما. The ayah says, إني أسمع وأرى. I am with you. I hear and I see what is going on. And in the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was with Abu Bakr in the ghar, in the cave, and Abu Bakr says, Ya Rasulullah, if any one of them looked at his feet, he will see us. And Rasulullah said to him, Ya Abu Bakr, ما أظنك في اثنين الله ثالثهما. What do you think of two that Allah is their third? That is called معية خاصة. It's specific company of Allah Azza wa Jal. But the general company, إن الله مع الذين اتقوا والذين هم محسنون. There's an ayah in the Quran that says Allah Azza wa Jal is with those who fear Him, who are pious of Allah Azza wa Jal, who have piety. الذين اتقوا والذين هم محسنون, and those who do good deeds. That's the general ma'iyah. And wallahi ya ikhwa, it's very hard to be a believer, a true believer in Allah Azza wa Jal, and not constantly be aware of the company of Allah Azza wa Jal, bima'iyyatillah. When you do, whatever you do, if you are a surgeon about to do an operation, it's not just Bismillah. You need to know that Allah Azza wa Jal is watching what you're doing. And that makes you do a better job. You are a worker. You do a better job, not just because the boss is going to reward you and is going to see the results of your work. It's because you feel that Allah Azza wa Jal is watching, that Allah Azza wa Jal is observing. And that's a general type of ma'iyah. So what Sheikh Sha'rawi says, يحفظك, and Allah Azza wa Jal تجده تجهز, that nothing will be hard for you. You will get things accomplished as long as you are aware of the company of Allah Azza wa Jal. وإذا سألت فاسأل الله. Sheikh Sha'rawi says you ask and you seek help when there is something that you are trying to do and you cannot do. It's outside of your ability. It is almost shameful to ask for help in something that you can do on your own. Think about it. Many times the first thing we do when we have an obligation is to reach out to someone to seek help, whether it's the wife or the son. Or if you can do it, why don't you do it yourself? مالك يا أخي شو ناقصك? What's missing? What's missing? If you can do it yourself. It's kind of a flat tire on the road, and you know how to do a flat tire, and you have all the tools that are needed, and then you stand there and you wait for somebody to come and help you. Why don't you try to do it first? And if you can't do it, someone will step in and probably help you, but you cannot ask for help before you try to do it yourself. So Sheikh Sha'rawi says, وَإِذَا سَأَلْتَ means if something is beyond your capacity, if something you know you cannot do your own, فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ, ask Allah Azza wa Jal. And here, the interviewer who was interviewing Sheikh Sha'rawi says, in everything? He said, no, not in everything and not from everyone. Because there's an ayah that restricts this su'al. This asking is restricted. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jal directs us and says, when you ask an expert. That means people who know. If you have a legal mas'ala, you go to an attorney. If you have a medical issue, you go to a doctor. If you have whatever issue you have, go to an expert. You don't simply go ask anybody. And when you're asking that person, it is like asking Allah, because Allah bestowed that knowledge on that person. That knowledge comes from Allah Azza wa Jal. No doctor becomes a doctor unless Allah gives him the capacity and the intellectual capacity to learn, to be a physician. Same with engineers, same with everything else. So وَإِذَا سَأَلْتَ, when you ask Allah Azza wa Jal, or you ask someone on whom Allah bestowed knowledge. That's whom you ask. You don't just randomly ask anybody else. And by the way, how many times do we say during the day, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ? Why do we say that? Because there are a lot beyond our capacity. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give us the ability to worship Him, but also we ask Him to help us and guide us in getting those things accomplished. What about benefit? Then there is the part of the hadith that says, if people have gathered together to give you a benefit, if the whole world, the whole ummah, wants to benefit you in one way that Allah has not prescribed for you, مَا كَتَبَهَا اللَّهُ لَكَ, it will not happen. Something will happen and it will be spoiled. And the opposite, if somebody wants to, if there is a harm that they're trying to do unto you, and if it does take place, Allah Azza wa Jal has willed it. And you may hear is a question that people who are afflicted with harm constantly question. Non-believers much more than believers. And that question is, why do bad things happen to good people? There's actually a book written by a Jewish rabbi about bad things happening to good people. Sheikh Sha'rawi rahimahullah says that when bad things happen to you, or to me, or any one of us, it's 3 reasons. The first one is takfir dhanub. Allah Azza wa Jal may want to wipe out some of your sins by putting you through a trial that will bring you closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. Wallahi, ya ikhwa, I've seen it in my own life and the lives of many people that I know who are believers. How when they are afflicted, when they go through hardship, how much closer they come to Allah Azza wa Jal. Some people actually are much closer to Allah when they are going through difficulty. And the opposite is also true. So the first thing is takfir dhunub. The second, according to Sha'rawi again, Allah Azza wa Jal may want to raise your level in Jannah, inshallah. Give you more hasanat by you being steadfast and sabr. And the last but not least, maybe somebody has some conceit and ghurur. Maybe somebody thinks that he is such a hot shot, that whatever he's doing is his own accomplishment. And Allah Azza wa Jal wants to put him in his place and teach him that whatever you have is a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal. And many times we only remember Allah Azza wa Jal, unfortunately, when we go through hardship. These are some of the lessons that we learned from this hadith. And the conclusion of the hadith, nothing is new. This is all written by Allah Azza wa Jal in an eternal book, and every one of us will suffer his fate, whatever it is. And what's interesting, Sheikh Sha'rawi says, since there is no Lord except Allah Azza wa Jal, Allahu al-Wahid al-Qahar, no one can second guess Allah Azza wa Jal, and no decision that Allah has made can be appealed. For that reason, of the hadith, رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجَفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ. The book is written, it's sealed. Like we say, signed, sealed, and delivered. It's done. What we learned from these two hadiths is that we should pay attention to the youth. But what about the special needs? Ya ikhwa, this entire hadith is about Ibn Abbas. Wallahi, I didn't know until yesterday that Ibn Abbas was blind. If you know that Habrul Quran, the one whom the Prophet ﷺ said, أعلم الناس بالقرآن, the most knowledgeable about the Quran, that none of the Sahaba could take a decision without consulting with Ibn Abbas. He lived a long life. He witnessed all the Khulafa. Sayyidina Umar would not make a single decision without consulting Ibn Abbas. Turns out he was blind. But all of these Sahaba, some of the greatest Sahaba, were afflicted with one thing or another. Al-A'ma, Al-A'mash. They have names. Al-Abras, Al-Akhfash. They have names in Islam. When you go back and you seek their seerah, you find that they were afflicted. But because they were nurtured in Islam, they became great scholars. Now what about the Sahaba or the Khulafa? And I'll conclude with this. Sayyidina Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, when he became a Khalifa, this is in the year 100 Hijri. In the year 100, he was among the Bani Umayyah Khulafa. Sayyidina Umar ibn Abdul Aziz asked his administrator to look throughout the entire Islamic nation to find anyone who has an affliction, a special need. Whether they were blind, whether they were paraplegic, regardless of what their sickness was. And he set a criteria. He said, even anyone who cannot get up for salah, for whatever reason. The standard was that you'd be able to stand up and make salah. If you can't stand up and make salah, then you need help. For anyone blind, he assigned a full-time companion, a servant, who gets a salary from the state to be with that person 24/7 to take care of them, as long as they need them. And for people who have less conditions that can share, he appointed one person for each two. That was Sayyidina Umar ibn Abdul. Later on, Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik. A lot of people don't speak nicely about Al-Walid, but one of the things Al-Walid did in the year 707 AD, which was, I forgot what year, Hijri, 707, that's almost 1300 years ago. He established the first institution. He institutionalized special needs, care, and maintenance. He established the first institution that will take care of the needs of special needs, whether they are blind, whether they are deaf, whatever their condition was. And we cannot forget the hadith in which Rasulullah ﷺ tells us. There's one hadith before that. There's another hadith that I find very interesting. Rasulullah ﷺ, a woman comes to him. This is narrated by Anas. a woman comes to him, and Anas says, I'm not saying that, he says there was something in her head. In other words, she was not all there. She had a mental problem. She comes to the Prophet ﷺ and she says, I need something. And she grabs the Prophet by his hand. The Prophet ﷺ says, what do you need? And she drags the Prophet and he follows her. And he says to her, take me, whatever you want. She walks with the Prophet ﷺ until the Sahabi, Anas says, until she gets her need done, whatever her need was. She needed something. And the Prophet ﷺ turned back. He did not say no. This is your Prophet. This is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, taking care of special needs. How about the one who lost his eyes? He says to the one who lost his eyes, his eyesight, said to him, Allah Azza wa Jalla will compensate you in Jannah. He is promising them Jannah and promising to see in Jannah. Amr ibn al-Jamuh, one of the great Sahaba, he was limping. He had a problem with one of his legs, and he used to walk. Kana a'raj. He looked at him and he smiled. He said, Ya Amr, inni araka bil Jannah. I see you in the Jannah, running around with 2 perfect legs. To make him feel better about himself, to Amr ibn al-Jamuh. And we hear many stories about how Islam took care of their special needs. I've never spoken about this subject before. I thought that we understand this without having to be lectured on, but I think it is something we need to think about and we need to contribute to and we need to participate in. And I'm very happy that this masjid is starting a program, I believe this coming Sunday, that will take care of the needs of special needs children. I ask and pray Allah Azza wa Jal to accept their deeds, and I ask and pray Allah Azza wa Jal to benefit those special needs, so that maybe among them there will be another Ibn Abbas, or another Ata, or another Bishr, or another Bishr ibn Burd, and many of the great Sahaba that we hear about. Mu'adh ibn Jabal, who was over, he used to walk with a limp, and he put him as an Amir in Yemen. He says to him, أَبَعَدْتُ لَكُمْ خَيْرُ أَهْلِ. I sent you the best of my family. That was Mu'adh ibn Jabal. These were the Sahaba among the Prophet. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to gather us with them on the Day of Judgment. Allahumma ameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.